Hi, Seth. I thought you might enjoy this. And as Francis Bacon wrote, famous scientist back in 1625, if the mountain will not come to Muhammad, then Muhammad must go to the mountain. So I'm sending you this class. This will be very short, though. So let me take a quick look here at the Gospel of John. So this is from Sunday. And I just thought I'd go through it with you. This is how I read Scripture, or one way I do. And maybe you'll enjoy it. So, if we're not going to be in class like we wish we were, and if Flipgrid isn't going to work for everybody, and it doesn't work for everybody, I'll try this. So feel free to email me back or leave a comment on here or whatever, and subscribe and all that good stuff, and maybe you'll see other stuff. Anyway, so this is from, let's see, I got to make sure it shows up on here. There we go. This is from the Gospel of John. Whenever I want to go and look at something in the Bible online, especially if I'm searching, then I do it by putting into the search USCCB, which you see right here, or up here, USCCB space Bible space, and then I put the gospel or whatever the book is that I'm interested in, and then I just go, look for it that way. So anyway, that's that part. I'm slow getting started, but then it'll be really good. So this was the reading for Sunday for Easter. And what I thought was interesting was this. I'm running this out of two screens. One's my streaming screen and the other one's this one. That's why I'm kind of bouncing back and forth. First day of the week, Mary Magdalene, that you know about, came to the tomb in the morning. And what's interesting is I brought up the other Gospels. If I look in Luke, first day of the week, the women, including Mary Magdalene, took it. If you see in the previous chapter, you'll see at the end that we'll just do it down here. Whoop, there we go, right there. The women who had come from Galilee with him followed behind. Doesn't say Mary by name. And then in Matthew, after the Sabbath, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary. Which Mary? Mary, mother of James? Don't know. And in Mark, Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James, and Salome. So there were, it's referred to in the Gospels in other places that there were, in the Gospel of Luke, that there were women who served. That was what they were called. And there were just women that followed along and just helped. It says assisting him out of their means, which would mean that whatever money they had, they were probably people that had a little more, that they would help with food and all that kind of stuff and just contribute what they did, same as now, really. The interesting thing is that the role of women in the Gospel of Luke is generally more. So if there's something like that, you'll usually find that's in Luke. And in time, you kind of get used to which Gospels tend to have which things in them. Let me touch this volume down. Well, I'm going to leave that there. All right. So I thought that was interesting. Let's see. So, and saw the stone removed from the tomb. So this is, I think this is interesting. So she ran and went to Simon Peter and the other disciple whom Jesus loved. In the Gospel of John, John never refers to himself as John. He refers to himself as the disciple whom Jesus loved. There's an old saying that somebody said that John was the disciple that Jesus loved most, and Peter was the disciple that loved Jesus most. And we're going to see some of that in here. So anyway, so Mary says they've taken the Lord from the tomb, and we don't know where they put him. So clearly, in spite of everything, they didn't anticipate a resurrection, even though Jesus told them that he would rise. It's just that typical thing that when he said it, this was not something anybody could have ever guessed. And you'll also see later that their minds were not yet open to the scriptures. They didn't quite get it until later, and someday we'll talk about why that is. So Peter and the other disciple went out and came to the tomb. They both ran. Let me make sure. They both ran, but the other disciple went out, but the other disciple ran faster than Peter and arrived at the tomb first. So the tradition is that John was the youngest of the apostles and that Peter was older. Peter was married. He was, the idea was that he was established. But of course, none of this is in Scripture. It's just the way that people have interpreted it, and there's some things that have been passed down. So John gets there first. He arrives. He looks down inside and sees the burial cloths there, but he doesn't go in. And the question is, why didn't he? So in Jewish tradition, it was something that you didn't want to go near tombs. It made them ritually unclean. That's one thing, just like touching a leper, but Jesus touched lepers, and we had that in one of the earlier videos. But he didn't go in. Was it because he was afraid of the tomb? Because, people traditionally have been afraid of graveyards and stuff like that. Was it because he didn't want to be unclean? Was it because, some people say, it was because he wanted to wait for Peter out of respect for Peter, since Peter was picked by Jesus as the first pope, the leader. And it could also be that he was waiting for Peter out of respect because Peter was older. It could also be because he didn't know what to do, and he figured that Peter would. So those are all the different possibilities there, and there's probably more you can think of. Let me know. So Simon Peter arrived after him. He went to the tomb and saw the burial cloths there. Same thing that John saw. And the cloth that had covered his head, not with the burial cloths, but rolled up in a separate place. So this is one of those other mysteries. John is the only one that mentions them being neatly put there. If you look in Luke, which is right, oh my goodness, here it is. Oh, next chapter. If I go to Luke, and comparing Gospels is a really interesting thing to do sometimes. So, okay, yeah. It says here that Mary was the one that was there first. It's the same thing. Went to Peter. Peter ran to the tomb. Doesn't say anything about John. And saw the burial cloths alone. But it doesn't say anything about them being neat. So in the Gospel of John, is that because John remembered that and told his... John's Gospel was the last one written. And he was living in Ephesus in Turkey at the time. He was the last surviving apostle. And did he tell people about the burial cloths being so neatly put away? Was there a reason that he told them that? Was it because Peter was caught up in the moment? So in Luke, it doesn't give that detail because Peter didn't care about that, which we'll go back to in a minute. Or is it just that because John was, kind of in an independent position, kind of watching what was happening with Peter, that John noticed it, or he had time to really think about it because he got there first? Anyway, but this is how I read Scripture. I really think about this stuff, and I picture this. Picturing it is a big thing for me on this. So what am I doing here? Okay, so I lost where I was even at there. Okay, but the point is, it's neatly put away. And here's the funny thing is that, so if you think of the tomb, if you think of, they would lay somebody out on a stone slab, essentially, because this was the tomb of Nicodemus, who was a wealthy, Joseph of Arimathea. He was a wealthy person, so he would have had a stone tomb with a slab and the whole bit. So Jesus made his bed. After the resurrection, everything got put away neatly. Who did that? Do we think an angel did that? That's a very human thing to do. Not that everybody does it, makes their bed in the morning, but it's a very human thing to do. So it's hard to imagine, but I can't think of any other explanation than Jesus made his bed when he was resurrected. I just think it's kind of funny. It's hilarious. And at the same time, it's very human. And it's one of the things that makes the gospel special is that there are things in there that are just too human, too natural to not be real. I mean, this is long before anybody was writing real novels or anything. Nobody was making up stories like this. So then John goes in, And he was the one that arrived at the tomb first. He saw and believed. So he realized what that meant. All right. For they did not yet understand the scripture that he had to rise from the dead. So there you go. It just explains it. And then they go back. So there's that, but then it gives the detail about the appearance, and which we didn't cover, but I really like this part too. Mary stayed at the tomb, so apparently she had gone with him as well, and that isn't mentioned explicitly until we get here. Or this is a second story, and it may actually be what happened before, except for the fact that, well, you'll see, except for the fact that she's talking to Jesus, so I don't know. So I guess she's gone back, or maybe she got there after they had already left, we don't know. Anyway, she saw two angels in white sitting there in the tomb. Now remember, the tombs are considered unclean, so for angels to be there is kind of amazing. So here's an interesting story from Greece. In, oh my goodness, what was it? In, I think, the story of the Trojan War, but I could be wrong. There's a goddess, and she goes to visit somebody that's dying, some hero. Might have been Achilles, but I don't know. And she tells him, you know, yeah, I can't stick around for your death because that would make me unclean. So this is actually a big deal in Greek religion. The idea was that the gods, or anybody that was a religious leader, could not be around somebody that was dying, because that would make them ritually unclean. It would make them impure to be around. So think of the people of the Greek culture when they learned about Christianity, reading this, and this was written in Greek. When they would read this, this is a god or angels who was willing to be in a tomb, that was not afraid of death, because in a sense the Greek gods were afraid of death. I just think that's fascinating. And if you really want to look, if you look at the Greek mythology, you can see that some of them, one was so afraid of being killed by his own child that he ate his children. I mean, this is Greek mythology, so it's really weird stuff, but something to think about. All right. Woman, why are you weeping? And she said to them, they have taken my Lord, and I do not know where they laid him. And when she said this, she turned around and saw Jesus there, but did not know it was Jesus. So in resurrected form, in some way, it was not noticeable. And of course, you know, if the last time you saw somebody, they were all bloody and destroyed and dead, and then you see them looking beautiful, you know, and like they're in great shape, yeah, you know, you might not realize what was going on. But she probably was so freaked out, you know, I mean, I would be. Anyway, so he says to her, woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for? And she thought it was the gardener, and said to him, sir, if you carried him away, tell me where you laid him, and I will take him. She's thinking that she wants to put him back into the burial place, onto the slab. And so Jesus says to her, Mary, and she turned and said to him in Hebrew, Rabboni, which means teacher. But here's the thing. She said in Hebrew, Rabboni. She didn't say rabbi. Rabbi means teacher. But Rabboni is, and I may be not pronouncing this perfectly, but in Hebrew, when you see things that are added on the end like that, the way that's added indicates a term of affection. And we do that in English sometimes. It comes partly from French. If you look at a name like Anne, and then you look at the name Annette, Annette means little Anne. So we'll sometimes call somebody little something. Napoleon was called the little corporal. It's a term of affection. So this was probably a pet name she had for Jesus. So that indicates a stronger, closer, more intimate relationship. And we know that he was very close friends with some people, certainly with Mary, Martha, and Lazarus. And the way that he relates to some people is more like a close friend than just a disciple. Not that the disciples weren't his friends, but you know what I mean. So anyway, the point is that when he says to her, Mary, we wonder if the term there really is one that's a term of affection of what he called her before, or she just recognized his voice at that point. And there's a whole bunch of stuff in the Gospels where Jesus says, the sheep hear my voice, I call them and they know me, that kind of thing. They will not follow a stranger because they don't recognize the stranger, but they recognize my voice. So it's, even though it never says anything about sheep in here, it's kind of cool because it makes you wonder, was that in the back of his mind, in the back of her mind? What's going on? Because it's his voice when he calls her by name that she recognizes him, not by seeing, but by hearing his voice, just like we can recognize the voice of God in prayer. Anyway, so she calls him by his pet name, and it just, I don't know, it's just so human. There's so much of this that's so beautiful and human. And then he says, stop holding on to me, for I have not yet ascended. And, we wonder about that. The fact that he says it means that when she recognized him, that her first thought was to just grab onto him. She was so happy to see him. People were physically demonstrative in those days. They would hug each other. There's a lot of embracing. Anyway, but he says that, and then, and there's a footnote on it. Let's go look and see what the footnote. Oh, I may have been off screen, sorry. This is a little confusing having to do this. Stop holding on to me. See this where in Matthew, where the women take hold of his feet. I have not yet ascended. So then there's some different thoughts on here. You can look this up. This is easy to find online. Okay. So, but going back up to it, let's see here. Come on. Yeah. But the point is that if he has to go and ascend to the Father, there's some thing there. It's kind of like he's got to move forward. And he did that a lot in his life. He's having to move forward. Let's not stay in this place too much longer. I've got to get to the other places of Israel. There's a gospel like that. But go to my brothers and let them know. So it makes you wonder if this part of John was pulled from multiple sources and edited together, because he says, go to my brothers and tell them, but she's already gone to Simon Peter in this gospel. So some people see these as contradictions within the text that indicate that it's not true. There's people that depend on the contradictions to prove it's wrong. But the thing is, it's an edited document. The Gospel of John here was written 40-ish years after the other Gospels. It was the end product of a lot of reflection by the Apostle John with his community. Think of him like a bishop for Ephesus. And so the people that were in Ephesus that heard him preach and listened to him probably wrote this on his behalf. It was not uncommon to employ a secretary or somebody to do the writing, but we don't know that he dictated it. We don't know if he dictated something or a series of documents of the gospel, and that those were then edited together and they mixed in things from other sources or things that he mentioned. You know how when you tell a story that sometimes you don't tell the details in order, kind of like I've done here, I suppose. You'll tell a story, but then you go, oh, I forgot to tell you this, and you'll go back to it. So if John did that, then it may have, they had just like a collection of stuff and they just put it together in some way the best they could. The other thing that's interesting, by the way, there's a film out, I think it's on Amazon. It's an old thing. The actor in it is Dean Jones, and it's basically him acting as the Apostle John, telling his story, telling the Gospel of John as if he was there with you, like as if you were in Ephesus listening to John. So anyway, all the rest of this is wonderful, but I thought that's enough for now. And I hope you enjoyed this. And, it might spark some questions, might spark some desire to go back and look at this. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope your week is good. Thanks.